Hello and welcome again to another and new video for A Song of Ice and Fire and a painting tutorial we're going to do for today, focusing on Wendamyr. Wendamyr is one of the special characters for Greyjoys that came in the Greyjoys Hero Box 1, and I've primed it in Chaos Black, which is like the Citadel Black spray, and that's going to be our base coat for what we're going to work with today, as I like to go from dark to light. Getting some old rose, of course, and putting that on the face of Wendamyr. So I think that's the only flesh part of this model. So just placing some thin coats of that as a base for that on his flesh. As that's drying, I'm going to take some jade green this time. Now this will be the sort of the basis of all of the Greyjoy type greens that you see. I have some on my palette as well of a dark sea green. I'm actually just going to mix that in with the jade green to form the base of his cloak, his outer cloak. So we're just going to give that a nice thin coat of that. I'm using a wet palette, of course, just to keep the paint sort of flowing well and to keep them alive and usable for a long period of time. If you don't use a wet palette, then I'd highly recommend investing in one, because they do really help out in keeping those paints. Well, you spend a lot of money on paints every year, so they're keeping them alive for longer, and between paint sessions to have the exact same hue and color of that paint you're using the night before. That's really a good way to do that, especially if you're mixing a lot of paints together. Now we're taking some whole red, and I'm going to mix some black into the whole red here to make it even darker. This will be the base for the inner robes for Wendamyr, and we'll give him a thin coat of that. Once you've applied a thin coat of that, we're going to take some flat earth, and we're going to use that for his hair, because he has like this light brownish hair. I'm not strictly going by the artwork on the card this time, namely because I was a bit lazy and I just couldn't find the cards straight away, so I thought I'd just use my own colours for Wendamyr. You're only given like sort of a profile picture of him anyway, so it's usually just the very top half you see of him on the cards. So I thought, yep, these colours would look fine for him. So I'm just giving a thin base coat of that for his hair. And also I will give the same colour to his sort of undersleeves, or just that shirt that he wears underneath. So I thought I'd just give that the same, very similar colour. We may highlight that or just shade it down so it looks a bit indifferent to the hair colour. And he's also carrying this parchment or scroll in his hand, or a letter. So I'll do the same using a base of the flat earth, just with a little bit of black in there as well, just to make it a bit of a darker base. We're going to go back with our jade green and dark sea green mix, and I'm just going to apply some highlights this time, just making it a little bit lighter. I'm just adding a little bit of grey, lighter grey in there as well. I don't really want to strictly, name paints as such. I don't know if people, appreciate that more or not. I just think that everyone. I don't want people to get the exact paints. You can probably mix up a color that's going to be equivalent. This sort of shows you just the process, basically just going from dark to light in every stage. It's very, very rare that I'll go from light to dark. Usually start with a base color, something darker, and then sort of either lining in or blending in the highlights from that stage. And that's the quickest and easiest process. I mean, I know there's contrast paints now that do wonderful things for people who don't have the time or skills to apply certain techniques to models, and that's fair enough. I think there is a place for contrast paints. I've not tried them myself. If you've tried them yourself and you think they're more beneficial than doing it this way, please let me know in the comments. But like I said, I haven't tried them as yet, and I'm just, I'm sort of stuck in the old ways of things, and I find this process just easier and more in control. I think the contrasts, you have less control. It's kind of like you apply the contrast paint, it just flows and goes into the grooves and highlights and shades naturally, based on the formula of the paint. I have a lot more control in where I place the highlights, where I place the shading, and that kind of thing on my models, which I prefer. And I must apologise because I've got a lot of these paints on my palette already because I'm sort of working on various projects at the same time. I was actually working on some Tully Cav just very recently, but I didn't film those. I'm sorry, guys. So, but maybe we'll have an opportunity to do some more stuff later with cavalry and that kind of thing. But I do have this so German Cam Brown. It's like a medium brown color. So anything like that would do, and I'm sort of just applying a very thin, watered down coat of that in the recesses of the cloak, just to get a bit more definition. Yeah, adds definition and also gives a bit of character to the model, I think. But that's a step you don't necessarily need to do at all. Okay, so we've got some whole red here. That's sort of dark brownish red. Okay, you've got equivalent color to that. Again, I'm sort of just applying a wash to the faces. Now, the faces on these models are not that well defined, and to be honest, the details on these models are pretty soft because they're in this sort of PVC plastic. I don't really, I'm not really painting them for real finesse or anything like that. I'm just sort of just painting them quickly, to get them sort of painted on the table and that kind of thing. I'm taking some burnt umber here, and that will be the basis of our highlights for the inner cloak. And you can mix that with a little bit of that whole red mix as well, just to build up the highlights, or you can just paint it directly onto the base coat that we've got here. Okay, so to build up our highlights again, I'm just using dead flesh. Now, dead flesh is kind of like a beige color, off beige. I'm just applying that to the burnt umber, and that will be sort of like, I'm sort of just penciling or lining in the highlights here. I'm not necessarily blending in. I just want to catch the sort of the very tip of each of the lines that flows on his cloak. And you don't have to be too heavy-handed here. You can make some nice sort of subtle highlights doing this process like this, and that just gives enough distinction between the folds of the cloak and just makes your miniature look a little bit, sort of pops a little bit on the base. So that's just an extra step, but you could just leave it with just a burnt umber highlight if you wished. Now here I do have some of that base green I use for the cloak, and I'm just sort of just applying that around the buttons on his cloak here, and I'm just applying very sparingly, very thinned out washes of this on the cloak. Um, it just brings kind of like I don't know, a nice, but unnecessary maybe, sort of look to the cloak. It just adds bit more character or a bit more. I don't know. I think the Greyjoys are all sort of very greenish in color, and it's sort of the way I want to approach them. Their bases are green, their cloaks are green, a lot of their armor's green. Um, so again, I'm sort of just mixing that sort of, I don't know, that's I don't know what to call it, but they look like these seafaring folk, so everything sort of has like a green tinge to it. And now I'm sort of just applying some old rose again over our dried face, just to pick out the definitions on his cheekbones and forehead and nose. He doesn't have a sort of pronounced sort of bottom lip or anything like that, and I actually think he does have a moustache, but I don't think the model really has a moustache sort of modelled in there. So I'll have to go back and correct that at some stage later on. Now just grabbing some Sunny skin tone. It's just like a very light yellowy flesh tone colour. I'm going to use that as the sort of final highlight on his face here. And again, same thing, but sort of concentrating in small areas and trying to get as much, well, paint on as much definition as you can on the face. Okay, that's probably the best way of explaining it. Like you would draw a face, as you sort of kind of painting on the highlights of his face there, just to get as much detail as you can on it. Again, the details are very soft on these models, so you can't expect much. And for that reason, it's always kind of a speed painting process for me when I paint a Song of Ice and Fire models. But going back to the painting here, I'm just adding some of that sunny skin tone to the flat earth base color to add our highlights. And again, I'm sort of just lining this in. Now you could do the reverse. You could paint it in a very light color and give it a brown wash or something like that. That's perfectly fine. Again, I think these videos are not necessarily tutorials in a way. They're kind of like just showing the process of how I would approach painting it. But then there's a myriad of ways of doing it. And each person has their own way and more comfortable way of doing things. I suppose this just shows you how I got from point A to point B, and these are the steps I took to do it in the most kind of easiest way of doing it, and that's the way I like to paint miniatures, especially for these anyway. It depends on the model. If I was painting like a Rackham type miniature, there'd be an extensive blending and highlighting kind of process, which these models do not, I don't think, really require so much. They're really basically tabletop miniatures that I like to game with. Here we can see a nice close-up of the face and hair and how that's coming along, which is quite satisfactory. And now we're going to take red. Now this is just called Vallejo red. It's a really nice color. It's quite a dark red, and I use it for different things, but mainly I found it. So I'm just applying a very thinned out coat of this just on the face. Not being too particular about it, but just on like the forehead, the cheeks, the nose, the lips, that kind of thing. It just adds a little bit extra warmth to the colors and just gives them a little bit extra life. It doesn't look so cold now. So adding some more of that dead flesh into a mix of the earth brown, and that's basically the I'm just going to make that as the new base for this parchment, and then just adding more dead flesh to that in order to highlight, and a bit of white as well. Well, it's not really white, it's actually a grey. Sorry, it's a grey. I think this is the like Space Wolf grey. It's like a really light grey they do for Vallejo game color. It's one of the old equivalents for Games Workshop's Space Wolf grey, basically. I just had that some on my palette, and I thought, okay, I'll just mix that in for a final highlight on that parchment. and that looks quite satisfactory. But you could just use either white or just dead flesh, something like that, if you didn't want it to highlight it up too much. I'm just taking another step here and adding some more highlights to the inner cloak here, just to find anything that I feel that needs a bit more definition. But again, these steps are not all that necessary. It just depends on how you feel and how it looks, and if you want to take it to the next sort of step, as it were. Yeah, but apart from that, I think it looks pretty well defined at this stage, and I think this might be the final highlight I'll give to the cloak. Now, for the parts that are black, okay, so it's already primed in black, so the gloves and the boots will be black. So basically, and this part of the back of his kind of armor or something he has over his shoulder, I don't actually know what that's called, but it's obviously part of his armor that he has, leather armor. So basically, I've already got black on my palette, and I've sort of just given that sort of a once over with just very quickly, and with some grey. Now I've got some, I tend to use like blue greys, if anything. Now I've got a special mix that I put together. Basically, it's basically the Vallejo dark grey, but when I get dark grey, I usually put in some blue ink into that mix and maybe some black ink, just to find a really nice base. Well, kind of like a first highlight for blacks and that kind of thing. As I'm using blacks a lot, especially for A Song of Ice and Fire or other projects that I might need it for, it just brings that really nice, beautiful mid-tone highlight to blacks. So I tend to formulate my own paints in that case. So if I run out of dark grey, I'll make my own pot of it using dark greys and blacks and that kind of thing, and blues, until I find the right mix. So maybe other people do that. Maybe they make their own sort of mixtures. It's just a shame that when they run out, then you sort of you've lost that original color that you've made. But try to make enough of it so it'll last an entire project. So again, I'm just going in here, sort of lining in some details, not really blending as much, but just lining in some grey highlights here to the black armor and boots. And now he has this kind of like, it's some kind of I don't know what to call it, but it's some kind of material that's wrapped around his neck. So I have used a it's a combination of black and that earth brown, basically, and sorry, the like that dark grey, which is a good way to make these sort of really subdued looking browns, is just put lots of like dark grey in them. Now, of course, Wendamyr is the maester of the Greyjoys, so he has all these chains around his chest. So, to pick those out, because they're already primed in black, I'm just using that sort of, it's called a French Mirage blue. That's the blue I'm using. That's the blue I tend to use a lot as kind of like a mid-tone blue. So I'm just going to do that straight over the top of the chains as a base coat for them, and then mixing in this sort of Space Wolf grey, or just like a really light grey. You can even mix white, no problem at all. And now I'm just getting some black, and to pick out all those little buttons on his cloak here. And once they are sort of just dotted in and lined in, we can do the same thing. We can just use that Mirage grey that we have on our palette, and to pick them out. Now, I didn't put anything in gold. Now, it looks like the faction doesn't like gold. You've got to pay the iron price, as they always say, is that motto for the Greyjoys. So everything's got it's kind of in steel, and there'll be nothing painted in gold. Now that's as far as I know. I don't think they actually have anything gold in terms of armor or jewelry or anything like that. Everything's all in iron and steel, I take it. So that's kind of the theme of the Greyjoys, so we'll keep to that. But yeah, just picking them out, and then we're pretty much done for that. And I'm just taking some white off my palette here, just for an extra little highlight, just on the very tops of the buttons. Now, people like to know brush size and that kind of thing. I'm using a 0 size brush from Rotterdam Co. Bit of a shout out to Rotterdam Co. If you've never used their red sable brushes, they're absolutely fantastic. And I've got nothing but good things to say about their customer service and their online web services and that kind of thing. Absolutely awesome. They were delivered to me some time ago now. But even I made a mistake in ordering one. I ordered one long handle and the rest short handles, and the kind lady at the customer service informed me about that before she shipped it. So I said, "Oh yeah, I'm really sorry, I ordered the wrong one. Can you please give me a short handle one instead?" So that's a bit of a trick for young players there. If you're ordering from Rotterdam Co, just check that the handle size is short, not long. These are like these watercolor brushes they sell, but they're really, really nice, really affordable. You know, I was using Artist Opus before, and they're excellent brushes, but boy, oh boy, they're really expensive, and I just cannot afford to buy them, unfortunately. And then I use some other brushes, as you probably know, those blue handled ones here in Japan from Pentel, which are sufficient, especially for projects like this, where you're not really looking for expensive brushes. But yeah, when you get a nice brush like Rotterdam Co's brushes, then they do make a big difference. So big shout out to them. I just painted up the bird. Basically, the bird is just kind of in this, again, black, dark color. You can paint it grey, you can paint it whatever color you wanted to. I thought I'd just keep it dark. I added some sort of white lines on his feathers. So he's looking pretty good, our little Wendamyr now. What do you guys think? I think he looks fairly good. Again, the purpose of these videos is to try to paint something really quick and breakneck speed. And I'm trying to get this done in under 30 minutes. And so far I've been pretty successful. I haven't really edited much from what I've been doing. I did take some breaks, of course, in between painting certain layers just to let it dry. I was watching some Song of Ice and Fire battle reports at the same time. So a bit of a shout out to the Rotterdam Gamers League. They have, I found a new channel recently with those guys in Rotterdam in the Netherlands playing A Song of Ice and Fire, which are really good. So I'll leave some links in the show notes below if you want to go and check those out. Okay, so just touching up, as I said, and finalising the model. I've just got some Hull Red here, sort of thinned out, and I'm just putting that into the creases of the cloak. I'm putting it on the hair as well, where there's sort of shading, natural shading and that kind of thing. I tend to find that Hull Red is a really nice colour for A Song of Ice and Fire miniatures, because it brings that grittiness, that sort of dark red, brownish colour. Yeah, it just brings the colours down and saturates them into this really horrible, dark looking aesthetic, which I think really matches this dark, grim world of A Song of Ice and Fire. But again, these are totally optional. You don't have to do these at all. You can skip all this altogether and leave Wendamyr as clean and just out of the box as you like, or you can give him some a bit more character, applying a few more different shades of dark, dark tints and glazes here and there. Right, so I think we're pretty happy with where it's at now. So we can go to the base. Now the base, because they're all sort of these, seafaring people, they live on this giant rock in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So I'm going to apply some kind of a greenish sort of tones to the base, and this will be basically the standard for all the bases in the army. Again, I really want to paint something really easy. I've seen people do some really amazing scenic bases on their Greyjoy models, which is fantastic. Some people like to apply some kind of like water effect and that kind of thing. And like rocks and what have you. That's great. I'm looking for something that's really simple and easy that I can knock out in a matter of minutes, basically, and to achieve a fairly decent effect that doesn't distract too much from the model, and it keeps it within the theme. So I've got some basically like turquoise and that dark green as a base. I'm adding some some light grey to that. When it's dried, I'm sort of basically not dry brushing, but it's the paint's loaded on the brush bristles, but then sort of just going over because the base is already textured with that sort of yeah, it's good. The base all they naturally have a texture to it, so I'm sort of just picking out the highlights on that, and that's basically it. I mean, you can be as elaborate as you like on the bases as you want. This gives me sort of this kind of sea foam kind of look to the edges of the bases. So it looks like he's on water. I don't know why he would be in the water, but he is. But again, bases are kind of a personal thing. People like to base their models the way they like to do it. This is the way I'm going to do mine. And I'm just giving it a black rim around the edge, which I think is very important to finish off the miniature. And that's it, guys. We've come to the final stage. So please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video, if you enjoyed it, if it was helpful for you, and I hope to see you in another one soon. Take care.